So I want to introduce our two speakers. This is Emma Drake, who is University of Prince Edward Island Student Union Vice President, Academic and External. That's quite the handle there.
Yeah.
And Tiffany Maclennan from St. Francis Xavier University, who's the Student Union Vice President, Academic. And they're both going to speak to us today about the student perspective on OER.
Yeah.
Take it away.
Yeah. First, I'd just like to begin by saying thank you to Siobhan, who works here at the CBUA. He's their VP Academic, and he had reached out to us probably about a month ago, I'm not sure, and he just said, you know, we're looking for some presenters on open educational resources. I know you guys are quite passionate about it and have some experience. I'd love for you guys to be able to come, and I was so excited that he had remembered that. So first and foremost, thank you to him, and as well Peter and Cynthia for reaching out to us and organizing all this. It's exciting to be a part of a conversation, you know, with the drivers of an open educational resource movement, who are the librarians and the people within the organization of a university. So I just want to begin by saying that, and yeah, we can get things started.
Okay.
So the first thing we wanted to talk about was kind of why open educational resources, especially from a student perspective. So you can see that we have 3 listed, so it's been touched on a lot of times, so I'm sure we'll keep this slide pretty brief. But the first and foremost is that it's incredibly cost effective to our students. As it's been said, textbooks have increased over 1,041% since really they've begun, and that is an incredible, astonishing amount to be paying for a book now. It was interesting for me because in one of the last presentations, the professor from KPU shared a book which actually sits on my shelf, and I've had to pay the price for. So being a student buying textbooks, I understand what the cost limitations are, especially for myself, like many in university, having a student loan. I'm a first-generation student from a low-income family, so textbooks are kind of a cost that you don't really understand coming into university because no one really tells you up front. It's, oh, welcome, just paid your tuition off, now you need to do your textbooks. And you're not really ready for that coming in, so the cost-effective part is really important when it comes to OERs.
And then, although costs are the most important thing for students, as it is kind of what determines what you buy and what you don't buy, it also allows flexibility for students depending on how you would like to receive information. As Kim had touched on, at Pressbooks at UPEI, you can kind of control how you would like to see the text, whether it be on your computer, just in a document form, if you would like to print it at the library, if you like it in an audio form, if you prefer to listen to it. It's very interesting how students can now actually, you know, for lack of a better word, manipulate the information they have to accommodate to the way that they would like to learn. And that's very exciting moving forward into kind of the future of academics.
And kind of moving more into the future of academics, as we see more and more, students are using technology to be able to learn in the post-secondary experience. So having online platforms as opposed to traditional textbooks is really a great way to go to be able to continue to accommodate to a changing student population. So as it was mentioned, I'm the VP Academic for the St. FX Student Union. I ran off a platform, kind of like our president, as Emma did once upon a time too, and within my platform was the development of open educational resources at St. FX. I was bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and a little bit naive, to be completely honest with you all. Our student union doesn't have any history of advocating provincially for OER funding. As it was mentioned, CASA, the Canadian Alliance of Students Association, has in the past advocated and currently continue to advocate for OER funding, but kind of as an as an organization within our institution, we haven't been promoting OERs really to our community. When I came in, I had my first meeting as the VPA of the Student Union was with the academic vice president of the university, who is also currently our acting librarian, as we're working on it, but slow but sure. And said to him, I said, Dr. Walmsley, I want to see OERs happen at St. FX campus. And very politely, he said, there's no funding here. So I was a little bit discouraged is the word I'm going to use. And as it turns out, kind of as I've been listening to the conversations here, I might have been talking to the wrong people. So kind of at a university administration level, we haven't had a lot of support kind of as a student union to really even have the conversations about open educational resources in our campus. There has been a bigger push on things like inclusive access. We've had Nelson Publishing come speak to our student union on multiple occasions this year. And then as a research project of my own, because unfortunately we're not cool enough to hire research students either, I've taken a class this semester that uses the inclusive access textbook model as their textbook for the course. Moving forward, I hope to see that kind of the information that we're able to bring back from this forum and from having students be a part of the classes using the inclusive access model, that maybe our administrators are able to take more of a push and kind of start moving a little bit more towards this. I know that we're in the process of making a Center for Teaching and Learning, so hopefully this will become one of the priorities moving forward, but we haven't had a lot of buy-in at the administration level so far. But on the flip side, our students see incredible benefits from open educational resources. Every conversation that's had with students is that our textbooks cost too much. Their textbooks are hundreds of pounds in their school bag and they're carrying them around all the time. And how great would it be to have even just the ability to print a chapter out of a textbook if that's what they wanted to use that day and carry it around, as opposed to carrying a full book. So we have a long way to go. I was actually really excited when I talked to Emma on the phone the first time, because I didn't realize how much of a contrast there was between our institutions, where as a student union we've accomplished very little in terms of OERs, but these guys have accomplished so much that it was almost like, it was hard to fathom. I was sitting there, I was so jealous is the word that I'll use. I was so jealous of kind of what they were able to do so far, but at the same time, having a lot of this information here today hopefully will kind of spark the ball moving forward a little bit more for St. FX, because there's a long road to go down. But it's going to be an exciting one.
Awesome. And as Tiffany had mentioned, we had quite the interesting phone call a couple of days ago, just comparing experiences. Fortunately, at UPEI, we've had a pretty diverse history since about 2012 with the original Open Textbook Committee, which has essentially just been accomplished through leadership of the library. As many of these great projects that we've seen at UPEI, it's been directly from the leadership at the library. And one thing that I will note is this has also been transferred into what the student union has been able to do. Seeing the leadership and the ability that the library is pushing forward at a local basis has definitely supported us in the research that we do, but as well on the external side. Within my role, I do Tiffany's job on the academic side, and I also try and do a bit of government relations, whether that be municipal, provincial, and federal. I should say you do that too, though. In a sense.
Some days.
Yes, some days. Depends on the day. And so a lot of the research that our own university has done on textbooks, as well as the initiatives that they have done, has supported us in provincial advocacy. So in 2016, we had developed a policy priority at the student union that was essentially looking into how can we get provincial dedicated funding for an open textbook fund, as I had mentioned in one of the previous presentations. And then that again had been named as one of our policy priorities for this year. So each year the student union does different sets of consultations with students. We do in person, we provide free food, as that typically helps for consultations. We do online surveys and different things like this to understand where are students' main concerns right now and what can we do as a student union to help that. And textbooks have been one of the main things that they had noted as this is a large cost, and we see that there are avenues we can take as a student union, but as well as a university in order to alleviate some of those pressures. So that's something I've been working on this year in talks with the provincial government, the Department of Workforce and Advanced Learning, but as well working with the opposition as well as the third party on Prince Edward Island in order to push this at the provincial level in order to ensure that we do have provincial dedicated funding. As I mentioned before, the Open Textbook Committee, this has been directly driven from the library itself. We've had some great discussions, I know, and professors such as Philip Smith, who had have been mentioned before, who has created, as well as some other psych professors, the Psych 101 open textbook, which has been enormously successful. I believe in the 2 years that it was available, there were over $200,000 in savings for students, which is phenomenal. This year, I'm not sure what the data is on that, but I'm sure it's much more because it is the most popular course on campus. So we see how we can kind of kill two birds with one stone when we're using these first-year courses that are the entry level. The information oftentimes isn't changing too much, but there's also the most amount of students that we can support at that one time. So we've seen there have been some successful initiatives at UPEI through that as well. History 101, History 102, Chem 101, UPEI 103, and there's some various others. I believe right now we're at about 6 or 7. That may have changed, we don't know. They're always in development, which is the exciting part. And another thing that's phenomenal, that's definitely worked in the favor of the efforts that we've done as a student union in collaboration with Robertson Library at UPEI has been having locally sourced press books. I've had the wonderful opportunity to work with Kim Mears with this student research position. It had been something that had came out of a budget surplus from the student union in the fall, and he said, because this is one of our policy priorities this year, although we're advocating to government on this, how can we support this internally? So we said we're going to fund this position. First and foremost, to create this internal list. What do we have on campus, but as well, what are we using? So when students see the lists of classes that they may be taking, they can see, oh, an open text is being used for this. I could save some dollars there. And as well, helping out Matthew Polly, who's one of our business professors right now. We're helping him adapt one of his own open textbooks, which is very exciting because that's just going to help students this spring, this summer, this fall, and for semesters to come. So we're seeing the direct impacts just of that one position right away. And Kim has been a wonderful resource. The three of us, myself, Kim, and Amir, who is our research student, meet together each week with kind of an update as to how the project is going. But it's directly from the leadership at the library once again, and it's really exciting to see the passion that they have for it. And one thing I will note as well, both St. FX and UPEI student unions are a part of the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations, and this is something as well historically that they have advocated on to the federal government. We've seen this since 2015 and was a policy priority during Advocacy Week in 2018. Each year CASA meets with MPs on the Hill to talk about the policy priorities of students at the federal level. And even I hadn't participated in 2018. However, during my term, sorry, that should say 2017. I meant, yes, that should say 2017. But in 2018, even when we were bringing this as a policy priority, MPs who we had met with the year prior had been asking us about this. Are you still interested in this? Is this a priority for students? And, we were saying, yes, of course, we'll provide you additional information. So we're seeing at the federal level, there still is interest there. So that's also very exciting.
Kind of moving off that as well, even though the funding for an open educational resource wasn't directly one of the policy asks for this year's Advocacy Week, CASA has been doing a lot of work still on all types of educational materials. So in January of this year, I believe it was the 24th, they released a full paper on educational materials beyond textbooks. So it touched on what open educational resources is. It touched on kind of why should we be investing in open journals so that we don't have to be paying for journals as students. And the list goes on. So it's just a really interesting read. So even though it didn't quite make the priority list this year, it's something that is still being advocated on very strongly and will come back to the table next year.
So what are some key takeaways? When we got together earlier in the week over the phone, we were thinking, what are the key takeaways to this? But we tried to narrow it down as simply as possible. And I think you could probably talk more on the first point at St. FX.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen a great push in open educational resources. They're being used all across Canada now pretty well. And saving students $10 million alone in BC, that's absolutely incredible. But there's a long road to going from kind of completely textbook model to more of an open model. It was actually quite interesting while Emma and I were making this presentation. I joked to her and I said, I never know what to use when talking about open educational resources. Do we use a book or do we use a computer as the clip art? So kind of just moving towards a more technology-based, something that's useful to our students, and of course is meeting the needs of our students kind of as we move forward. As it's been mentioned in a few presentations, this is also a culture change. And as we know, that culture change is long and slow, and it doesn't always take off the fastest, but usually we end up seeing tremendous benefits from culture change overall. So there's more to do, but all roads are fun roads.
And just building off that too, coming from the student perspective, first and foremost, our responsibility is the students and the positive benefit it does have them clearly just in the costs alone. But we also recognize the cross-campus benefits. I mean, when we look at the collaboration with the library and how they're integrated into that, we're seeing that there are large costs to academic journals and other subscriptions that are hindering kind of their costs as well. And then when in one of the earlier presentations noting how the bookstore can get involved in that. There's so many other kind of offshoot positive impacts that it has that it's really exciting to see that it's not just limited to one group who this can help, but various groups on the campus community. And at the end of the day, collaborate. That's where we've seen the most amount of success, and that's exciting that in the other presentations that's kind of been the reoccurring theme, reach out to others and see where you can get information for this. And that really is kind of the spirit of OERs, is taking information here, putting it together, and then this person adopting it, this person adapting it. I think it's similar to what we do from campus to campus and as well province to province. So I think continuing to move forward, collaborate is kind of the key message. Yeah.
That's us.
That's us, yeah.
And so does anybody have any questions for Tiffany and Emma? Online or in the room? Yep, Suzanne?
Just wondering if, not
there are some faculty, especially in the computer science program actually, who are using more kind of open source. I don't know in terms of like actually using kind of things through like OER BC kind of through the actual traditional model. I think people have kind of found free things. There has been quite a few classes on our campus which have been using the inclusive access textbook model through Nelson Publishing. So we're seeing kind of a slow uptake, but it's not many at all. I'd say within the 5 to 6 classes max.
Yep.
You mentioned a bit about the lobbying the federal government and the provincial government EI. In Nova Scotia, what sort of vibe do you get from them?
Yeah, so with our provincial government, so our provincial government lobbying organization is called Students NS, comprised of St. FX, Acadia, SMU, and 2 NSCC campuses. We haven't really had OERs kind of on our policy ask, and the reason being is that our students kind of historically have been asking for things more around international students, like how do we get MSI on day one for our international students, because we've been trying to get more and more international students in. How do we make more work opportunities for students through things like co-op? And our provincial advocacy group hasn't really done enough research on OERs in Nova Scotia to be able to present it to the provincial government. I know that the people who we've been talking to kind of laying the lines down for next year, we've really been trying to prioritize open educational resources because we think that within the next few years that we could really start seeing some wins from students, but in the past it just hasn't really been a priority.
just following on that, in this past fiscal year,
I don't know, I'm sorry.
okay, just very curious.
Any questions online? Got somebody typing something. I do have one quick question. So you guys both work through CASA, but my understanding is there's another GovA student group that goes nationally. Are you guys connecting in any way?
So we're not associated with that group at all, just historically. Neither of us really do any interactions. We've seen some success with CASA, so I think speaking on behalf of both associations, we've seen success, so we went forward with CASA just because of that.
Thank you. Any other questions in the room or online? Are you guys open to questions later if people want to contact you? Okay, so we'll be sharing all that information online, contact information. There's somebody typing, but we'll see. Anyways, thank you so much for the student perspective, because that's one of the pieces we often don't get in the sessions that we have, at least in the library world. We don't get that student perspective, and that's very helpful to us because that's one of our primary user groups that we need to, and so we need getting that direct feedback, and that's actually something that I would say is something as a takeaway or a give back to you is more direct contact with the libraries at your institutions. I think that would actually get the conversation going really well, in terms of, because the library itself also has contacts that you can make use of in terms of and working together, just as a feedback type of thing.
That's great. Thank you
Well,
so much.
well, yes, and thank you both, and we're happy that you're going to engage in the whole. You've been engaged in the whole session because that's really helpful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.